Welcome and thank you for joining our HCEG webinar series today. I'm Ferris Taylor, Director of the Healthcare Executive Group, and today's webinar is one of several in our series of HCEG webinars around critical topics. Today we will be discussing the value of using virtual second opinions to increase member engagement and decrease healthcare costs. This topic builds on last week's webinar on intelligent care management technology and driving towards the quadruple aim. And you can find recordings to those and other webinars on our hceg.org website. We are glad you've chosen to join us today. Before we get started, let me mention just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all attendees will be on mute. So throughout the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A box in GoToMeeting to submit questions. And we want to encourage questions. I'll probably mention that more than once. We will save time at the end for an open Q&A with our panelists. In addition, the webinar is being recorded. And we will be sending you a copy of the recording, the slides, the reference materials, resource materials, which you can also click on during the webinar if you would like. Those will come out in just a couple of days. And finally, in a few minutes in the webinar, we will be showing a 3-minute video. There might be a brief pause as the video loads in GoToWebinar. And if it does, we don't want you to lose attention or think that there's been a technical difficulty. Again, we're excited to have you join us for this unique opportunity to look at the facts and the figures and the opportunities on the challenges that payers and employers are having in controlling the staggering costs of healthcare. Even more importantly, as healthcare becomes more consumer-centric, we will share the benefits of second opinions and how they can optimize medical interventions and positively impact and improve member and employee health. We are fortunate to have with us today Dr. Rodney Musselman, Executive Director, Medical Director of Utilization Management Solutions for the Medical Records Institute of America, and Bob O'Brien, the Executive over the Best Care Business Unit, also at MRIoA, to discuss second opinions and how to make second opinions from nationally qualified physicians easy and readily available within the healthcare process. So with that introduction, Rodney and Bob, why don't both of you tell us a bit about yourselves and how you ended up in this important area of healthcare, and then let's get our discussion going on second opinions.
Thank you, Ferris. I'll start. Rodney Musselman, my background's in family medicine, family physician by training. I was in clinical practice for 10 years, and then I joined MRIoA in 2013, performing some reviews, so utilization management, IRO work. Then we realized that is serving a great need, but there's still additional need to ensure the appropriate care is being provided to patients, and that's when we developed our My Care Choice second opinion, so we can really reach out to patients, provide them additional information, education, and let them be more informed about the treatments they're receiving.
Excited to have you with us. Bob?
Yeah, so good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are around the country. Appreciate you tuning in today to learn what we've created around second opinions. My background is having spent many years at Aetna in a variety of roles, including product and working in small group, middle market, national accounts. So very familiar with the health plan side of things. Also spent some time with grand rounds and actual meds before coming to MRIoA. And what attracted me to MRIoA was their passion behind creating solutions that could really help patients as they go through their care journeys. And what we're going to talk to you about today is one such product that we have and the details around it. So next slide. So today what we're going to do is we want to have you get information about the value and the benefits to members. So what does this do to your members? Because when you think about a solution in a health plan, not only, especially on the fully insured side, does it need to be able to impact cost, but it needs to increase patient satisfaction. Why are alternate treatments important and how do they help patients? How do second opinions for high cost medications impact member health and overall cost? What are the risks and recovery for the initial diagnosis and alternate treatments? And how health plans and self-insured employers can save money by providing virtual second opinions. So at a high level, that's what we're going to talk about. You know, there's a lot going on in the healthcare environment today, but one of the keys is everyone is busy. And one of the outcomes sometimes when we're all busy is we don't always adhere to best practices. If you talk to any physician, specialist, primary care, they'll always say getting a second opinion is really important. Let me give you a quick example. So 3 years ago, my father, who was 82 at the time, fell and hit his forehead when he fell. We brought him to the hospital. They did x-rays. They found that he fractured his neck. Now, he walked into the, he could walk, he could move his arms, he had no tingling in his extremities, nothing like that. We went to one of the academic medical centers here in Connecticut, and the neurosurgeon that saw him upon entry suggested that we go ahead and do cervical fusion. Having, I don't have any clinical background other than I know that I want to get a second opinion before someone does a surgery like that. And so we paused their desire to do an immediate surgery to have a second opinion. When we were able to get the second opinion relatively short order, he looked and said, that's the most common fracture I see in people your father's age. If he is, able to move his hands, walk, no tingling, what we're going to do is put him in a stiff collar for 3 months and monitor and see at the end of that time period, how have the vertebrae started to fuse back together naturally? So we came back 3 months later. You can probably tell where this is going. He had made some progress. They had started to join back together. Put him in a soft collar for another 3 months. At the end of 6 months, he didn't need the surgery. He was fine. Now, start where this began, right? We went to what everybody would say was the right place to go in the state of Connecticut. That's the best institution. It's not always about the institution. It's about the doctors you see when you're there. And so when I had the opportunity to come and build a second opinion solution, that's what I bring to this, is a passion that these second opinions are an important step in everyone's care journey. If you go to the next slide, while we're looking at the healthcare environment, we're all familiar with these pain points, right? We've got drug costs that are accelerating. We have drugs in the pipeline with prices that are now in the millions. We've got almost analysis paralysis when it comes to data. We've got so much of it. It's becoming increasingly difficult to access specialists in any type of timely manner. We also have a hard time getting through and navigating the healthcare system. It's expensive, we don't know where we're going, and we need help. And that's what My Care Choices is focused on doing. So when we started thinking about, you can go to the next slide, when we started thinking about creating a value proposition and a second opinion solution, I didn't want to create something that already exists. You've got grand rounds, best doctors, advanced medical, consumer medical, and they all have wonderful solutions that work for the self-insured employer. They work for the self-insured employer because they take multiple years to develop savings, and they include presenteeism and absenteeism. I wanted to create a solution that worked on the fully insured population. And in order to do that, I wanted to start with something that is overprescribed, overutilized, and expensive. MSK is where My Care Choices started. Part of it comes from, if you knew these facts on this screen before your surgery, would you go ahead with it? If you knew 20 to 40% of all back surgeries fail, would you go through with it? And if the first one fails, what the failure rate is of the second one, the third one, the fourth one? If you knew that there's really strong evidence that lumbar fusion is not more effective than conservative treatment, would you go through the risks, the costs, and the recovery? Does everyone understand when they go in for hip and knee replacements that it's only for a short period of time? Not short, but for a certain period of time, 10, 15 years, and then you have to go in and have another one? So what we wanted to do is, if you have these types of communication opportunities, is we really wanted to take advantage of it when we built MyCare Choices. If you look at the bottom, you can see overall that the MSK portion of overall healthcare spend is really large. And so if we could find an opportunity that both managed cost by finding the appropriate utilization while increasing patient satisfaction and their outcomes, that would be the right solution to have. So this is what led us to creating MyCare Choices. The next slide. So what we want, so second opinions. So I said at the beginning, everybody recognizes it's a best practice. People want it. We know it saves money, but they're hard to do. They're hard to do because I have to find a new specialist. And if I'm going to get a second opinion, it really has to be outside the practice group or the one I'm with. I have to do it in a timely manner because I'm not looking to wait 6, 8, 10 weeks. I then have to get the clinical records over to the new specialist. And then I have to, if I'm younger, I have to take time off from work to get there. And if I'm elderly, I have to arrange for transportation to get to the second opinion. All of those factors are impediments to doing a best practice, even when it's for our own health or a loved one's. And that's really what was the foundation and the driving force to creating MyCare Choices. So when we start looking at the value proposition on the next slide for MyCare Choices, we wanted to make sure that when we think about the fully insured solution, and that's what this is geared towards, whether it's commercial or Medicare Advantage, is delivering savings. So we've got $800,000 in savings for every 100,000 members. That's for 6 MSK and 4 cardiovascular. Phase 1 is MSK. First quarter of 2022 is going to be the cardiovascular, and phase 3 is going to be driven by our health plan clients and them deciding and coming to us and saying, this is a problem area we need to focus on, or this is the problem area we want to focus on. We knew that in order for this to be successful, we had to create a strong education platform. And this is what differentiates us from everything else in the marketplace. It's a stool with 3 legs. You've got one leg where we've got a patient report. The patient report is available to the member, and the first section talks about what care alternatives are available. And it's written at a 6th grade level so that it's very accessible to the population. The second part of the report is clinical in nature and written more at 11th or 12th grade level, and is really intended to be a dialogue and to provide either the PCP or the specialist with information about why the reviewer, our specialist, is suggesting or offering up alternatives. The next step in the education tool platform is an educational video. We're going to play you later on a small snippet of that educational video. What it provides is an overview of what is the surgery, what's the recovery, what are the risks, what's an illustrative cost, and then what are the alternatives? To give you an idea, for lumbar fusion, the video is 9 minutes long. We were a little bit concerned about the length of the video, and would people facing this surgery be interested in something like that? When we played it for them, they devoured the information. What we realized is that they're looking for information. So they go out on Google and they Google everything they can find. The opportunity to have something coming from a trusted source, an independent arbiter, is really valuable to them in terms of giving them all the information they need. Because what we have found is that the conversation around risks in recovery is very inconsistent with different providers. And then the third leg of our stool is a conversation with one of our medical directors, such as Dr. Musselman, to talk to the patient about what's in the report and what concerns they might have. So that's the educational platform. The other challenge that we wanted to address is that right now in the second opinion marketplace, it's largely driven by members having to know they have the benefit at the time they have the need and then reaching out. That's a big lift. And that's why utilization is so low, is because patients simply don't remember they have these benefits when they're facing this type of an issue. So what we have done is we have designed MyCare Choices to build off of the competencies and the strengths of MRIoA. We do more than 1 million reviews a year. We can do prior authorizations. So by combining MyCare Choices with the approved prior authorization process, I know 100% of the people that are available that are going to have a given procedure. Then what we do is we begin to reach out to those patients and engage them in a conversation about a complementary second opinion that they have access to. What that allows us to do is to make sure that we find everyone who's eligible for the service and then find those that have an interest in a second opinion. As I said, we can do a quick turnaround time. Once we have the clinical information, we turn the opinions around within 48 hours because we recognize how important that turnaround time is. It's built with a lot of flexibility. It's not one size fits all. So if you want it as part of the PA process, we can do it. If you don't want it as part of the PA process, you can do it that way. If you want us to do the PAs, we can do that. And then it's just seamless from beginning to end. So what we wanted to do was create value, but recognize that there were going to have to be flexibility built in at the front end to accommodate all the different needs that different health plans have. And probably most important, it doesn't require an IT integration. So all of that is what really stands behind the high-level design of MyCare Choices. If you go to the next slide, what's interesting is if you think about the prior authorization process, it's all about ensuring that some minimum clinical criteria is met. And that's what it does. So what we did is we took a group of individuals that had been approved for certain surgeries, sent them out to specialty matched physicians and said, do you agree that this patient's surgery that they've been approved for is the next best step in their care journey? Top left is hysterectomy. 47% of the time, the specialist came back and said, no, there's something the patient should try before they do the surgery. Top right, lumbar fusion. 47% of the time, they came back and said, no, try something else before the surgery. Bottom left, knee arthroscopy. 60% of the time, don't do the surgery. Septoplasty, 40% of the time. What this begins to highlight is that the PA process is an important first step, but it is not the end. It is really just a minimum criteria that you've got to, and that there is a gap between that and what really is the best evidence-based medicine for this patient. And that's part of the value of a second opinion and why it's important. So let me talk to you now about what the care journey looks like for the patient. So the next slide. So here you're going to see in the top left, you have the patient who receives the diagnosis. So they've been told that they need to have cervical fusion. They have the provider typically is the one who's going to submit the clinical information into the health plan. If it's denied, then it's going down its normal denial pathway. However, if it's approved, this is where we're saying we can begin the intervention with MyCare Choices. We'll begin to evaluate the patient. So for example, if they have the surgery already scheduled in the next 7 days, it's highly unlikely that they're going to be interested in a second opinion. So we may exclude those individuals. And then with the others, we're going to reach out to them and we're going to talk to them about the opportunity to have a second opinion where we'll identify the specialist, we'll collect the medical records, we'll get the report, we'll come back to them, allow them to have a conversation so that they don't have to do anything other than say, yes, I'm interested in a second opinion. When they enroll, we will at the time of enrollment schedule their follow-up call with Dr. Musselman or one of our other medical directors. What that allows us to do is not only set the expectation with the patient, but also gets them to commit to the call and know the time that it's going to be. This is also on their, the secure portal where we have all of this information. They go in with their login name and their password, and this information is there so they can follow up on it. But it allows us then to continue to get their buy-in that, yes, not only do I want it, but here, so if it's Monday, the follow-up call, if we have all the clinical information, can be on Thursday. So then what we're going to do is we're going to collect the information, we're going to send it out to the specialist. When the specialist sends back their report, Dr. Musselman or one of the other medical directors at MRIoA is going to review it. And we review it to make sure that what's being presented back aligns with what we presented at the beginning and to make sure that it's readable for the patient. Once that's done, it gets posted to the secure portal that the member has already registered on. And at that time, the patient will receive a text and an email letting them know that the report is available. When they log in to look at the report, they will have a video that is curated that directly aligns with the report. So if patient A is epidural steroid injections is one of the options, then that's the alternative treatment they'll see. If the other one has physical therapy, acupuncture, as well as epidural steroids, they'll have all of that in theirs as well. So they get each one directly aligns with the report they have. Then we tie it all together with the conversation with our medical director to give the patient the information they need to make the best decision for themselves and their family. That's what this is all ultimately about, is about educating the patient. During the call with our medical director, the other thing that we're going to do is ask if we can share this information with their primary care physician. What we want to do is give them back to someone who's an independent arbiter of their health and has a holistic view of what's going on with the patient. If they agree, our medical directors will make a peer-to-peer call to the PCP and share with them not only the report, but the concerns that the patient expressed when they were having their conversation. That the goal of all of this is to educate the patients. And then what we will do is we will follow up with the patient at various time intervals to see if they have gone ahead and had the surgery. The other option is certainly if the health plan has the capability, is following the patient to see if the surgery has come through or not. But the goal is then to understand what that timeline is. And what we're willing to do is offer ROI guarantees around that to show the commitment and the belief that we have in the product that we have created. So if we go to the next slide. So this is two of the legs that we have for our education platform. So on the left, you can see a high-level overview of the patient report. Again, the patient report is designed so that there is a high-level summary written at a 6th grade level so that the patient can easily understand and digest what the care alternatives are. The second section is clinical in nature, written more at a high school level, where it's really intended for not only the patient, but also for their clinicians to read and understand what the options are that the other specialist is recommending. And then the other portion is the video. And we're going to play a small snippet of one of the videos that we have so that you can see what it is that we're looking at and what we're describing.
Welcome to My Care Choices, your virtual second opinion. The following video presentation was made to help you better understand your condition and the surgery your doctor has recommended. It will also provide both surgical and non-surgical alternatives which may be appropriate for you. We encourage you to speak with your doctor about these alternatives. Your My Care Choices physician representative will also be available for questions during your phone consultation.
Anterior cervical discectomy and fusion. This surgery removes a herniated or degenerative vertebral disc in your neck and replaces it with a bone graft. This can relieve painful pressure on spinal nerves. In preparation for the procedure, you are positioned on your back. You are anesthetized. The surgeon creates a small incision in the front of your neck. The structures within your neck are gently moved aside to create a path to your spine. The surgeon carefully removes the damaged disc. This leaves a space between the vertebrae. The surgeon inserts a bone graft into this space. The graft fills the open space. It holds the vertebrae in the proper position. The surgeon may secure the graft with a metal plate and screws. When the procedure is complete, the incision is closed. As your spine heals, new bone will grow. The graft will become permanently attached to the vertebrae. This is called a fusion.
As with all surgical procedures, there are risks and complications to consider. For anterior cervical discectomy and fusion, it is important to understand that the benefits of surgery are not clearly offset by the risks, and it may not work in 5 to 15% of cases. There is little difference in long-term outcomes compared to conservative therapy. The risk of having a complication from an anterior cervical discectomy and fusion is between 13% and 19%. The most common risks include difficulty swallowing, bleeding, and infection such as pneumonia and wound infection. Injury to the recurrent laryngeal nerve causing paralysis of the vocal cord and changes to your voice, as well as damage to the esophagus, can also occur. Damage to the joints and discs above or below the fusion is fairly common and occurs in 3% of patients per year. Other risks include leakage of the fluid around the spine, failure of the hardware used in the fusion, and the risks from anesthesia. Finally, it is important to know that around 15% of patients will require an additional surgery to address a complication related to the cervical fusion. It is particularly important to speak with your surgeon about their specific fusion failure rate.
So what we wanted to do was to give you a sample of the video. The rest of the video, I think, is worth spending some time with, and we're happy to show it to you. It covers more of the risks and the alternatives. But, please contact your salesperson, and we're happy to go through that with you. What I'd like to do now is transition into My Care Choices, really with specialty drugs. This is something that came about through our PBM clients, and they're asking for help with high-cost medications. And this was really something that we worked in conjunction with them to create. And now I'll pass it on to Dr. Musselman for him to give you an overview.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, as you mentioned, many of our clients, PBMs, and even some health plans have come to us with a big concern regarding these specialty drugs. The biggest driver really being the increased utilization and the cost of these drugs. They're the fastest growing cost areas in the drug spending currently. Whereas they're only representing about 1% of the claims, It's about 50% of the net pharmacy benefit spend today. It was 24% in 2013. So as you can see, it's in 8 years, it's doubled, and that trend is expected to continue over the next decade. So you can see some of the drugs that are outlined on the spreadsheet, but the pipeline's growing. There's a gene therapy that's expected to be approved next year with a price tag of $2 to $3 million, which will move it to the top of this list that you see. So we've created a solution utilizing national experts to help address this problem. These experts can provide the insight into the overall management of these patients that have these rare or complex disease states. They can validate when these treatments are appropriate, including the site of care where these drugs are being delivered. And they can provide other options that, that would be appropriate to consider for the particular patient in question. The next slide will kind of show some of the overview of the solution. So first, it's just identifying a patient who has one of these conditions that's complex or rare, or being prescribed one of these medications that's a specialty drug. And then we gather the information, provide it to a national expert, where it's just like a consult that happens out there currently, where the national expert would contact that treating provider and discuss the case with them, go over the latest research. How does that research apply to that patient? And what evaluation and management considerations would be appropriate, including the site of care. They can discuss the options and then provide a report back to that treating provider to further help them in the management of that patient. And if desired, we can then even reach out and call that member to discuss the considerations with the patient over the phone. The next couple of slides will show a couple of the examples and some of the conditions that we're targeting of hemophilia and hereditary angioedema. So the first one you'll see is hemophilia, a fairly complex, costly disease state where you're not only treating the patient, but you're also hoping to reduce some of the complications. Bleeds can affect many organ systems, bleeding joints causing joint destruction, and obviously MSK treatments are quite costly as well. Even routine care, though, much more complicated in a patient with a bleeding disorder, whether it's OB care or any treatments. Patients that bleeds can have a lot of complications. Treatment for hemophilia, very complex. It can be as simple as on-demand therapy for a bleeding event, or it could include prophylaxis. The cost effectiveness varies with the different treatments that are available to those patients. Plus, the therapy that's chosen can impact the development of inhibitors, which further increase the complexity and cost of treating that patient. There can be dose escalation, bypassing agents that are needed, immune tolerance induction therapies. So the treatments that are being considered impact the cost and complexity that the patient's going through. So a national expert can really help with providing management considerations, which might be the most cost effective for that patient and what would be really appropriate. Again, next you'll see hereditary angioedema on the next slide. It's another condition that's rare, and there is complexity in both diagnosing and managing that condition. There's different types of hereditary angioedema. There's also angioedema that's not hereditary and it's treated completely different. So a national expert could confirm what type of hereditary angioedema the patient has and whether or not a patient would need prophylactic therapy, which is obviously very expensive and not always cost effective. There's many triggers for hereditary angioedema, and have all those triggers been evaluated so the patient can avoid them? If the patient's not having that many frequency of attacks, then they wouldn't need prophylaxis. So an expert would be helpful in really deciding which patients truly need that type of therapy versus those who do not. And again, as I mentioned, the pipeline of drugs for many of these conditions continues to grow. It's just important that we make sure that we're getting these treatments to the patients who truly need them. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ferris.
Terrific. And Bob, thank you. Dr. Musselman, especially on the specialty drugs. I can't imagine that anyone on the webinar today hasn't either through family or friends or neighbors experienced the the patient anxiety, the member anxiety when you have a diagnosis that is a serious medical condition. And many of us have been very fortunate to find the natural path. Bob, as you described your father, my father was a farmer in Idaho, had a bale of hay fall off a stack and hit him on the head. And luckily, and he didn't get a second opinion, but luckily the doctor that he had went to the right procedure. 6-8 months later, he was fine. Well in his 70s, lived to be 94. I'm glad we didn't have the surgery. So this is excellent. Let me encourage questions to come in. We have just a few at the moment, and I'll pose those, and then between the two of you and any insights that I can provide, we can deal with those. So let's start, Rodney, with the one, and I think you alluded to this, so it was probably a question that came in while you were talking, and that is, with the examples that you used, which are rare conditions, do your PBMs or your health plans see a high rate of drugs being prescribed?
Yes, I mean, even though these are rare, if you look at the stats, there are actually 25 to 30 million Americans who have a what's quote unquote a rare condition, which these are costly. So even though they're rare, they're not unheard of, and our clients, PBMs, payers are dealing with these conditions fairly frequently, even though they're rare.
Terrific. Bob, I think probably one that at least relates to the process flow chart that you had put up, and that is, can this process, the virtual second opinion, be administered without the prior authorization process, or does it need to be coupled with the prior authorization?
Yeah, thanks, Ferris. So, a couple of things. First, all of the solutions that we've presented today aren't about restricting any access to care. It's really about helping ensure that the best and most appropriate care is being presented to the patient. So that's really what the underlying philosophy of all of this is. And when we talk about the specifics around, can I do something with or without the PA? Yes, we built it so that it has flexibility like that on the front end. We also have the ability for the health plan's care teams, internal care teams, to have access to the patient reports so they can be up to speed on what we're doing. We really wanted to make sure that it was a very holistic solution so that it would work for all the different health plans out there.
Terrific. And this next question, I think, and I can answer part of it, we will share some of these slides so you can see them. Bob, you'd showed a slide with a lot of different quotes. And what's being highlighted, I think, relates to Dr. Marty Macary's quote, where he said that he encourages second opinions routinely, the one down here in the lower right-hand corner. The question is, aren't you questioning your doctor when you do that? Are you going to offend your doctor?
So, great question. The best doctors are always looking for the best solution for their patients. The only physicians that we've seen that get upset with having a second opinion are those that either aren't confident in what they're doing or are going beyond what really is the best practice for that particular patient or surgery. So we've gone to and had patients with the leading experts in the country, and they're excited about the opportunity to get a second opinion from someone, because it may highlight to them that there's something else they could do other than the radical surgery that's being proposed for the patient. So most of them are hungry for that type of information. There's a large lag between what happens in the best practices in the academic institutions of the US versus what happens in the local market. So having these second opinions help give that information to the local markets more quickly.
Terrific. And this is my own question, Bob. last week, I think it was just a week ago, I saw a JAMA report on waste in the healthcare system. And as I read down through, and I didn't go through the entire report, but through the executive summary, there's two things that jumped out at me. Failure of care coordination, $78.2 billion, over treatment and low value care, over $100 billion. Can second opinions have an impact on that?
Yeah, it certainly does, because it's helping you get to the bar of the best evidence-based medicine, right? That's what we all want. What is the best evidence-based medicine for me in my condition? And having two people collaborate on what is the best option always is better than just having one person in isolation come up with it. So it's one of the important tools. It's not a solution in and of itself, but it is an important tool as we work through that.
Terrific. And I don't know if that JAMA report, Dr. Musselman, related to drugs as well. Was it comprehensive, or do you know if it covered specialty drugs as well?
I honestly don't know if it covered specialty drugs. I certainly saw that there's a lot of low value care that was addressed, vitamin D levels and other services that just don't have any value at all in some members, and why they're being ordered. But I apologize, I'm not sure if specialty drugs were called out in that article.
In any case, it's billions. It's not millions. And that has 3 more zeros attached to the end of it. So this is definitely an area that has potential for significant impact. And we move through a lot of material here fairly quickly. We have a question. Can you highlight again what My Care Choices does that is a differentiator compared to other solutions like 2nd.MD or Consumer Medical, and the two of you probably know the list of others that are out there. Any comments?
Yeah, Ferris, I'm happy to address it. So there are several fundamental things. First, when we think about the services, we wanted to be able to deliver immediate savings to health plans. And in order to deliver savings to health plans when it comes to second opinions, you can't necessarily open it up and do everything because it's just impractical. There are many things, most things outside, frankly, of MSK that don't deliver any savings. And so most health plans, and I say that having sat in the seat of being responsible for product at Aetna for middle market, was we couldn't invest in our fully insured product if it wasn't going to save money. So what we wanted to do was design a suite of services that would save money at the next renewal, not something that was 2 years down the road and 3 years down the road, because with turnover and group turnover, the population isn't going to be stable. So that's the first. The second is the way those programs operate is you have to continually communicate with the population, your membership, to make sure that they know that they have a second opinion benefit. You can also train your member services reps, but that's oftentimes too late in the process to be able to be involved. And so what we do is, by being part of the PA process, we identify 100% of the people that are going through. We can reach out to them, we can talk to them, and what we're looking for are those individuals that are interested in a second opinion. It's not everybody getting the surgery. Some people getting the surgery have met the criteria to get the surgery, and they're going ahead with the surgery, no matter what any of us say or do. That's fine. They've met your criteria, they're going through. We're looking for that part of the population that's on a railroad track, is interested in alternatives, but either doesn't have the knowledge to navigate to get somewhere else or doesn't have the time. And so that's part of what we do. And then the video component of our education programs is fundamentally different than what everybody else does. So those are just 3 of the highlights of what we do that's fundamentally different than everybody else. And then if you wrap in what we're doing around high cost medications, it leverages the clinical team that we have at MRIoA. We have more than 30 medical directors, and we have more than 20 pharmacists, PharmDs on staff that give us the expertise to be able to have these conversations and to be able to review the information to provide and help the patients navigate these times.
Excellent. Couple of short questions. Can that patient report that you showed be private labeled?
Yes, it could be private labeled. The whole program could be private labeled if somebody was interested in it.
Excellent. And there's and Ben, thanks for the previous question. Please keep the questions coming in, and we see a number of them. Can you talk about how the industry as a whole is approaching member second opinions versus provider to provider second opinions? What are the differences in coverage and payment costs and the process?
So that's a great question. They're really almost at two different points in a member's care journey. So one is in my PCP's office, and I've got pain in my foot, and they're struggling with, should I send them to the orthopedist, or can I really just send them straight to PT? And a peer-to-peer consult is where the PCP has the ability to send the information, typically through their EHR, to a panelist orthopedist who will look at it and say, yes, you should send them directly to PT. And so what it does is, in that scenario, it stops the patient from having to go to the orthopedist to get the same recommendation they can get at that point in time from their primary care physician, or if they have to follow up with a phone call. So that's the peer-to-peer solution. What we're talking about is, with My Care Choices, somebody has been told, get this surgery. They've gone through and met the criteria for the surgery. And then what we're doing is looking at it. So we're looking at it in a fundamentally different point in time in that patient's care journey than most peer-to-peers. Now, there's always the option somebody has of, in a complex case, getting a peer-to-peer referral, but it doesn't really happen that often. So it's not something that you see that often as well.
Thanks, Allison, for that question. I'll expand on it, Dr. Musselman. Why don't PBMs have a process within the PBM to get a peer-to-peer second opinion?
Good question. I think they're starting to look at that, but it's not easy. But that's why we are working with them, and some of them are approaching us, and we're discussing how we can help them providing second opinions on some of these specialty drugs that they're using.
And Ferris, what we're looking for is, if you look at that, some of these drugs are relatively rare. We're having, as the expert on our panel, the person who is at the national conference presenting to their peers about the latest research. So we want the person who is going to be doing the peer-to-peer consult on the pharmacy side to be, when they call up Dr. O'Brien goes, oh yeah, no, I'm very familiar with Dr. Musselman. I'd love to have his perspective. And that's what it is. It's about education. It's about the expert sharing their perspective, their experience, because they probably see more of these than the person that's done the prescribing, and having a dialogue around what we're doing and why they're doing it and what just might be the best path for the patient. So that's what we're trying to get to.
Excellent. And if there are any more questions, please pass them along. This last question that's come in is going back, Bob, to your one of your slides on how does a health plan achieve that 3-to-1, at least, that was on the slide, that ROI in that first year. I think you've touched on that. Is there any more that either of you would like to say on that?
No, I think that, what we do is, by identifying those individuals that have an interest in a second opinion, we then give them the education and the tools to be confident that that's the right decision for themselves, and then we measure it. And that's what we're doing. And I think probably the easiest way for us is to get into the details is to simply have a conversation with those that are interested and go through exactly what we think the cascade is from the pool of everybody that's been approved for the surgery to how many do you think are actually not going to take it? Recognizing these surgeries are anywhere between $60,000 and $80,000 each.
Excellent. Any final comments from either of you? We have a couple more questions, but we will follow up on those one-on-one. Any wrap-up questions, comments, Dr. Musselman, Bob?
All I'd say is just thank you, everybody, for your time. This has been built largely with health plan and PBM inputs. If you have, things that would make it more valuable to you, please let us know. We're open to suggestions, but we're also willing to stand behind these with ROI guarantees, especially as it relates to the MSK side. So thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
And I'll just add, yes, thank you again. It all comes down to the patient and ensuring they're receiving the most appropriate treatment. So again, thanks for attending.
And thanks on behalf of HCEG, Bob and Rodney, and for each of you as attendees. I didn't say much about HCEG. We're a national network of executives and thought leaders actually celebrating 33 years and working together to improve and reshape healthcare. And each year we query our members on the top 10 issues for the coming year. Turns out that cost and transparency is #1 on the list, and I think we've taken a good shot at some of the major costs of healthcare and a very simple process for addressing that. We want to thank MRIoA and your team, Bob and Rodney, for helping us put together the discussion. We will be sharing our contact information, so you can contact me or Bob and Rodney for further follow-up. As a reminder, we interact with the industry in multiple channels. The webinar series is just one of those. We do national industry pulse research, reports, newsletters, and other activities. And by facilitating these interactions, which are all virtual at the moment due to COVID, we provide a platform for getting to know each other and to interact and to find doable, actionable solutions to major healthcare problems. You can always learn more about HCEG either through our social media or our hceg.org website. Again, thank you, and we're going to give you back a few minutes of your day to get prepared for your next meetings. Thank you, and have a good day.